What's going on, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Learning from the Pros. Joining me today is Brandon Alisaglu, sharing his top 10 tips for ABM advertising. He is an ABM practitioner, and he has just started a new consultancy called Insights to Ignite. Brandon, welcome. Glad to have you.
Yeah, hi, Silvio. Excited to be here and excited to dig into some ABM tips.
Why don't we just kick off to the audience, to the AdConversion community here, and just kind of give a quick background on yourself and kind of your experience with ABM and kind of how you've gotten to this point.
Yeah, it's really been an interesting road, as many marketers started off as an attorney years ago before getting into content with places like Bleacher Report and eventually getting over to agencies and analytics and SEO and all that great stuff before moving over to the paid side and then kind of learning we can drive all the leads we want, but if they're not the right leads, it doesn't matter. And the best way to find the right leads and the right accounts is account-based marketing. Go after the people you need.
Kick us off with the first tip, Brandon.
Yeah, along those lines of finding the right people is you need to keep in mind that you need to play the long game. I know a lot of folks love to talk about that in marketing, but we've all been in those meetings where we need a shot in our arm for a pipeline right now. We got to get these quarters numbers up. That's not what ABM's for. ABM is all about creating engagement with the right accounts. So start with things like education. Let them get to know who you are. It's much more like a dating process than anything else I found in marketing, and just running a bunch of Google ads, hoping to collect a bunch of demand generation. So the big takeaway here is stop running demo ads at accounts that don't know who you are or have never engaged with you. They're not going to bite, and they're not going to marry you right away.
Yeah, it's a pretty good tip. I'm just thinking, maybe people listening to this are like, Brandon, that sounds great, but I need pipeline yesterday. How can I play the long game? How long is long enough? Kind of how do you think about that?
Yeah, and that's where a good account scoring system will help you identify accounts that are properly in market right now or closer in that buying cycle. A lot of times you can look at the activities that they're taking that past opportunities took before becoming an opportunity, before saying yes to the demo request. And that's where you can say, okay, these people have been on our website a ton. They're opening our emails. They click these ads. Now we know that these are the ones who go out and target right now with those demo requests. So, of course, there'll always be somebody that generally is engaging with you already. So go ahead, put them at the bottom of the funnel, try to hit them over with those value props and that urgency to get them into a demo call today. But otherwise, long game, make sure that your targets are set as far as these are the people we want to understand who we are before we start asking them to come to the demo.
That's awesome. Just to break that out a little bit for everyone listening. Let's say you have a list of 100 accounts, right? And you identified through whatever tool you're using, 20 of them are in market. They're already on your website. Maybe they requested a demo. Start there, launch your ABM program there in terms of trying to get those accounts over the threshold so that they actually can turn into pipeline before you start to action against the other 80 that have never been to your website. Maybe they don't even know who you are. They've never had any interaction with you before.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of skipping a bit down into a different tip, and I'm just going to go ahead and shoehorn it in right here if that's all right.
Yeah.
But that's where we have the kind of dossier of information that we're going to hand off to sales. So we're going to take all of that, the ads that they've clicked, the sites that there's certain pages on your website that they've really read or shared around, as well as any emails they're opening or anything they might have even sent to you in a chat, and take that, put that in a dossier for your sales team. So now when it's time for them to do their outreach and you are pairing that with one-to-one messaging to really get that demo request or get that next big meeting out of the way, you can personalize it even more. So you know what they like, you know what their pain points are, hammer them with that in a personalized way when you get to that bottom of the funnel so you can get those demo requests and open up those opportunities.
Nice. That's awesome. So would you say having a third-party tool for ABM is necessary to activate against this?
It's not necessary, but it certainly helps. So there's a lot of good buzz out there about Scrappy ABM is one company in particular that I follow that they're really about getting you started in your ABM program, and you don't need to buy the big expensive tech stack right away. And he's not wrong. It's Mason Cosby, a lot of good content over there. But when you are getting deep into these situations to deepen your ABM and you're trying to scale up, having that type of tech that could take all that data, process it, and make it easy to report and share with sales what's going on, and also run your targeted ads for you in most cases. It's definitely a time saver, and it's definitely going to save you a lot of headaches and a lot of manual work.
Yeah, and it probably makes a lot of sense. Like if you can't get early traction already, proof of concept, don't feel like you need to just jump right in, lock in with a 12-month contract with, most of these platforms are 12-month contracts. It's like get your MVP off the ground, essentially, get traction, then take it to the next level, right?
Yeah, have something to show your CFO before you go asking for tens and maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars to get off the ground. Yeah. But when you do have it, it's connected to your CRM and LinkedIn and everything else. It does make things fly a lot faster.
That's great. I just want to recap point number 2 there. So tip number 2 was to create that dossier of information. So essentially, your accounts are consuming certain types of content on your site. You know that they're interested in certain things. If they're already in the sales process, maybe they've mentioned certain things they're interested in overcoming. Essentially, you're creating this dossier of information to arm your salesperson to then go ahead and engage the prospect with the most relevant content.
And at the same time, you can now use that information in your ads. So this is where it gets a little bit more of a manual process, in the fact that you will have to create these ads that have a message that is strictly for them. But if you're working on a big deal that you're trying to close, that little bit of extra effort can go a long way towards getting your foot in the door and hopefully land, expand, and do all those great things with ABM.
This comes into, now we're talking about acceleration campaigns specifically, from a paid perspective. So now it's like, you got Microsoft in pipeline, hypothetically, and they've voiced these, just adding on to that, one of the things that we found works really well is when you're running acceleration campaigns, what we like to do is we like to do objection campaigns and social proof campaigns. So what we do is we work closely with sales and we say, hey, what are the top 10 objections that are coming up from these lists of accounts that we have as an open op? One of the biggest challenges, though, we've run into is like audience size. So typically what we do is if the deal isn't large enough to target individually, we'll target a list of open opportunities and we'll ask for like those shared common pain points and objections. And then what we do from there is we create ads and content specifically addressing each objection. And then we'll measure the engagement rate and response rate of the ads click for each objection. So it's kind of meta, because it's like, price is an objection. And then it's like, we'll run these ads. It's like basically overcoming that specific objection. So it's like you and I are on a sales call. Maybe we have a call booked on Monday, but then you're on LinkedIn and you see this ad saying like, concerned about price? Here's 6 reasons why, blah, blah, blah. You should justify this investment. Or like it's a social proof campaigns where it's basically like in feed. And it's like, those folks at AdConversion are amazing, or like, so on and so forth, and kind of like, kind of instilling into that acceleration play.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And I like that strategy, especially with the top 10 objections. I'm going to steal that.
Yeah, go for it.
Tip number 3, and I think we'll jump back into it as far as where I was looking at before, but make sure you're going deeper with these. So you're playing the long game and you're really getting deep into with your dossier of information. You got there because when people clicked on certain ads, you knew that you needed to go down that path with them. So you kind of have your broad, your education, your awareness ads at the top. And now you start to narrow in on the pain points that they select. Make sure you're giving them to the right page to help them go further into their own story. So just as they're getting to know you, like we talked about before, with you're not asking them to get married right away. You're not asking them for that demo request when they don't know your name. You're getting to know them. So all of this leads into that dossier at the end, but in the middle, in that nice place where they're still kind of figuring out what they want to know about you, make sure that your ads are dynamic enough in the sense that you're looking at it every week or so to make sure that you are coming up with the right ideas and the right content that's going to keep them engaging further.
I love that. So essentially what you're doing, I almost think of it as like you're creating this buffet, and you have this buffet with all of these different meals, pieces of content that you feel would be most helpful to these accounts based on where they are right now, essentially in the buyer's journey, as best as you can segment based on what you're seeing in your CRM. And then from there, they can choose, right? Oh, maybe I'm interested in this piece of content. Let me dive deeper there. And then that then informs the dossier that you put later on. So it's almost like you're pushing this content out so that one, you get the benefit of brand awareness and nurture, right? And you're educating these folks. But then in a meta way, they're creating your outreach later on, because based on the things that they're engaging with, your sales team in a perfect world would then outreach to them and kind of follow up with more like context and personalization.
Exactly. And this is why it's nice to have that tech stack to keep all of this organized, because as you can guess, it gets convoluted very quickly. But there's a lot to keep up on. But that's why when you work ABM properly and you really get into what their pain points are, you can see a lot of traction.
I love that. Just one tip for everyone listening. If you're thinking to yourself, how am I going to do this? I don't have a tech tool. I don't want to invest in that. Like, just simple way is use LinkedIn's demographic reporting. So if you're targeting your list of accounts through LinkedIn's demographic reports, you can see which companies have been exposed to impressions, which ones are actually engaging. And then if you can take it a step further, and then you can leverage like a third-party data connector to be able to pull the demographic data from LinkedIn through the API, you get so many more insights, because when you report through the demographics report on LinkedIn, it's a native platform, you're limited to the amount of impressions by company. But when you pull the data through the API, it allows you to go, I've seen as low as like 2 impressions per account. And then you can also see the engagement by account as well. And it's a really cool way to kind of get away around those limitations.
Following up on that, I think in the next place I would go is this all kind of gets to a thing I like to call the so what. And that's where when you're looking through the data and you're trying to figure out what it all means, one of the things that when I worked at an agency, people would just show reports like, okay, our traffic went up Y, and this keyword ranks wherever third. They never gave the so what. And that's what you could do with ABM, I think, better than most other methods out there, is really lay out what that means for your target audience. So not just the functionality or we'll save your engineering team 20 hours a week. What does that mean? Like, and somebody out there can say, well, that's great, but I already have an engineering team that I pay this much money to be there. So it's not really doing anything for me. What is the actual outcome that's going to help my company or me? In that case, maybe it's I'm going to get promoted because I'm bringing more to the table now. So that's really something to go along with the drilling in, going deeper, playing the long game. Make sure you're getting to the so what and the outcome that we're hoping to hit for them. Yeah,
my brain immediately goes to, this is the long game. And we live in an impatient world, where we want to see traction. We want to see progress, rightfully so. If you're investing thousands of dollars into this program, if you're not setting up these leading indicators across your funnel, it's like, so what? We got an impression on this account. I don't care. But if you can tie it to, look, this is part of our funnel and this is part of the journey. And like, we're moving these groups of companies and users of these companies, and now they're here and then they're here. And I can almost imagine, like, as you do this enough, eventually you'll start to make these inferences and correlations where it's like, well, I noticed, like, for example, when I used to run performance at Metadata and like I helped build a programmatic program, like we noticed like once a certain amount of companies get a certain level of exposure in terms of impressions, the likelihood of an influenced opportunity being created was like, 50x. If you set up that funnel properly and you have those different milestones, then you're able to tie it to the so what, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where another great part of this is we can always A/B test with any ad campaign, and you always should. But in particular, you can really drilling down into that seniority and title. People really need to take the time to think about what their messaging is going to be across their accounts, by verticals, by segments, whatever you might be doing. But the big thing is, okay, we have account A, and they are in this particular vertical. So we know we're going to talk about that particular functionality that we have. But make sure then you are then drilling down to, we're going to talk to our C-suite like this. We're going to talk to the directors like this, and our managers are going to get this message. And now we know that managers are worried about moving up to directors. Directors may be moving up to the C-suite. C-suite wants to show that they know how to grow a company from 10 million to 100 million or whatever it might be. So make sure that you're matching your messaging to those personas and what their actual desired outcomes are, or what matching their motivations. And there's a lot that can be said for finding that messaging through the testing. So to combine a bit of these 2 points is we're drilling down into these titles, we're drilling down into these personas, and we've created this messaging matrix based off that. But now make sure we're running 2 to 3 different variations of that message. So maybe they don't really care about motivation, or maybe somebody doesn't really care about being a director, but they want to be able to finish their job well at the end of the day and not have to work all night. So you just got to figure out what the right message is for each group. And it's a great way to be able to test them and to have a learning that goes along with it. Like you were just talking about with the so what, it's a bit of a different take on that.
Brandon, I hear what you're saying, but I'm just thinking about like, what about the person listening to this where they're like, I would love to, in a perfect world, to be able to create this unique experience by job title or seniority, but the company that I'm going after is just not large enough to be able to use a job title filter according to LinkedIn standards.
Well, there's a couple different directions you can go there. You brought up earlier about like your top 10 objections by verticals. That'd be a great place to start. You could definitely run those ads, see what connects. But the other thing I would say is maybe that account isn't really qualified for this approach. If it's such a small company that they don't have enough people to where we could drill down to these different seniority levels and hit them with the right messaging, then I have to wonder if they can afford your offering. Because if you're running ABM, chances are you're running a high ticket item. And you probably should be if that's the case. Otherwise, I'm not sure ABM is the proper way to go anyways. So if they don't have enough employees to consider filtering down to, I would reconsider whether that account should be in your approach to start with.
If the company isn't that large, it's like, essentially, it's not true ABM where it's strategic and it's part of a larger initiative and you're going out hunting for whales, essentially, is kind of where my brain goes, right? Like, we're not just hunting sharks here, we're hunting whales. And it justifies all of this operational work, the content that goes into this, so on and so forth. And if you're on the flip side of that, where you're like, you don't have a large enough account list or company size to do this level of differentiation around the audiences and the filtering and the criteria, then really that's not ABM. That's just more targeted advertising, because now you're filtering it down even further, where it's not just anybody, it's people at these accounts that are great, which is totally great and you should do it. But for what we're talking about here, true ABM from a strategic standpoint, you need those larger companies to be able to do this.
Yeah. I mean, if we could fit them into a one-to-many campaign, which borderlines on targeted demand generation, there's a lot of people love to talk about what qualifies as this or that. It ultimately doesn't matter, because good marketing is just good marketing. But if you're going to put in all that effort into ABM and the investment financially that usually comes with that, I'd make sure that the people that we're targeting are indeed those whales.
Got you. Do you have, this is a very case-by-case question, but if you had to say in your experience, like, what's a large enough ACV, generally speaking, that somebody's listening to this right now and they're like, does strategic ABM, is it a fight? Is it a road that I should go down? What would you say is, like, just generally speaking, if you have an ACV greater than this, it's something you should consider?
I'd probably go around $20,000, and that's a benchmark I've seen put out there. But a different way I was thinking about this, I recently posted about this on LinkedIn, was if your contract requires a CFO sign off, then you probably need ABM, because that means that you're at least going to have to target that CFO and get him on board, because he's not going to sign, or he or she is not going to sign a contract from a company they've never heard of without quite a bit of, okay, so what? And there we go, going back to the so what. And more than likely, you as a manager, whoever you might be, you've got somebody else in your department you got to get on board. So there's another instance of specific messaging we have to get. And more than likely, there's going to be an operations team, whether it's marketing or rev or sales ops, whatever we want to call it. So now we're talking 3 different messages already. So that's usually a good sign that we need ABM, is if a CFO has to sign off on it.
I love that. That's awesome. So just to recap the 5 tips we've gone through so far. Tip number 1, play the long game. Tip number 2, create that dossier of information. Tip number 3, go deeper. Tip number 4, so what? And tip number 5, drill into the seniority or title.
Then we also had you don't need fancy tech, and I kind of snuck that one in there on you, but It doesn't hurt. One thing I'd love to add to the go deeper part that I didn't bring up before, if that's all right. That's where you really want to get into those insights to create the right content. Just like we were talking about right before we jumped on, if you don't have the right content, none of this matters. We can run all the best ads in the world. They won't get you over the hump when those people get to your website and look for that content based off of the needs that they have. So make sure you're looking at those insights, putting together, again, that so what, creating that content that really allows you to go deeper and then continue drilling into that pain. Set aside time every week to ideate and create. And this is one that I have always struggled with. I've had to put in calendar blocking recently, and that's helped. I don't always stick to it, and then I mess up my whole week. But it's so easy to be chasing, those leads and trying to get everything going that if you can just set aside an hour, and I found Friday afternoons are usually when nobody else is around and I can take that time to do it, to look at those insights and just let my brain start clicking off of what I'm seeing. Just start putting down the 50 taglines, like you heard them say in Mad Men. Oh, we need you to come up with a list of 50 taglines for whatever burger restaurant it was. I can't remember. That way you can have this list of things to go to when it's time to start testing a little bit more and really find out what's working. So if you're testing with your A/B testing, you need to have the ideas to try.
I love this so much. This is a topic near and dear to my heart. Around experimentation. Yeah, 1,000% adding on to that. For your experiments, you should be documenting them somewhere. I always tell people, it'll feel like you're moving slower, but you end up moving faster in the long run because everyone else is repeating the same mistakes they made 6 months ago and they just forgot about. So you'll continue to stack on your success and build on your wins while other people are just kind of in this constant loop of ASAP and they never actually get anywhere. So absolutely get in the habit. I love that tip of just spending time to think and ideate and review data. So many applications for that, not even just from like an ABM ads perspective or just running ads, but like as a founder and a business leader or like a manager, or like whatever your function is, spending time to really think and ideate and marinate on like the core problem, I think is something that like not a lot of people do. And adding on to this even more, because it's so near and dear to my heart, is get in the habit of asking yourself really good questions. Because if you ask a great question, you'll get a great answer. So I'll just give people one in the sense of like the entrepreneurial space. It's like, what has to happen in the next 6 months in order to kill the company? What a great question, right? Or like, if we had to grow 100% through word of mouth and referrals and close down our website, how would we operate? Like great questions like that, just your brain just goes and just sparks so many ideas. And on that note, around like that scheduled time for ideation, maybe having a list of questions, like to think through or like things to look at when you're going through your review process, I think could just make it even more productive.
Yeah, that's a great point. Also around the documenting everything. That's huge in ABM, and I'm now wishing I'd put that in as a tip, but it's not necessarily just ABM in general. It's such a time saver when you can be like, hey, here's the link I sent before or per my last email. We'll leave that part out usually, but this is the process, sales guy or sales gal. Let's go.
And everybody listening who's like, oh, what tech do you use like to document these experiments? And they're already overcomplicating in their mind, like whatever works. Like if it's a piece of paper or notes on your iPhone or a Google Doc, like keep it simple. It's better to do something consistently bad than great a few times.
Personally, I always use Google Docs, and I use the headings setter, or you can set it with normal text or a heading. And that way I just create the big ones with headings. So you can easily jump around on the left with the table of contents. It's saved me a lot of time. And obviously searchables help. Using templates to really help accelerate all of this. So if we're going to take that time to drill in these personas, to figure out these pain points and test all of this stuff, you need to have something that you can just rip off, copy, place it in display ad and go. And one of the biggest shortcuts I found through a little bit of pain myself was asking the designer to give me the templates myself so I could pop them in Canva and just try a bunch of different messaging. It's a super simple step. It's not something that's going to set me aside as some giant scholar. But it will save you a ton of time. So design templates are key to doing all of this testing.
Get a design template created, and then from there you can iterate essentially, right? So you can adjust the copy of the headline on the creative. you can make those minor tweaks, but you've got the 90% of the work done, essentially. Yeah, in addition to that too, right? Like if you're going after these lists of accounts, you're going to be, by definition, in a smaller audience size in terms of LinkedIn's standards. So that means you're going to rack up a higher frequency faster, meaning you're going to need to refresh your creative faster, which by having these design templates, you can stay ahead of ad fatigue even easier. The 10th and final tip.
It's going to be a little bit of a shocker, but don't skip Google Ads. And it's not that we're necessarily, of course, retargeting campaigns, all that great stuff. You can kind of target the companies you want on there, but that's not really what I'm looking for here. Customer questions, prospect questions, those types of things that they're definitely going to put into Google to find out the answer to are what can be huge later on, because then now you're showing up to answer all of their questions. You're not just the guy who's running a display ad at them talking about their pain point. When they go to Google their pain point, you're there giving them an answer. And the best part about a lot of these questions, they're cheap. Nobody's worried about going after these types of keywords. Great example from my time at Thought Industries, we sold an LMS. Well, there was a new thing that came out that was an LXP, so the learning management system versus, I think, a learning experience platform, something like that. But point being, sales folks were constantly getting this question. So we decided to capture a salesperson's answer to it, transcribe it, put it in a blog, and start sending it out via ABM and run. And it did so well that we started running a Google Ads campaign for it, because LXP versus LMS, that keyword was like pennies on the dollar. It was so cheap compared to, our target keywords that would be like $75 a click. So you're getting into you're getting your target audience with a question they're going to answer. And of course, not every account that lands on that blog page is going to be in your target, but that's not a bad thing anyways. You're still going to have some demand generation efforts going on. So it's a way to kind of bridge that gap between the two and really cast a wide net.
So just to run that back, because it's so important what you just said, and such a different way to put a lens on Google Ads, because most people, when we're thinking about Google Ads, we are thinking high intent. So in the example you gave, I would be bidding on like best learning management platform, right? And I'd be paying $70 a click for it, rightfully so. What you're saying here is you've identified some key questions that are always coming up in the sales process. That then inspired content that your team created. And then from there, you were having such a good job organically from that content already, just answering those questions, that it then led to the insight of like, hey, what if we actually put some money behind this and covered it from a paid search perspective? And then that was a huge unlock. And the benefit is it's a unique way, because the problem with search is two people can search the same thing and you're still going to pay the same price. Google doesn't discriminate. You're going to pay the same for the intern as you are the CEO. And it is what it is. The cool thing about this approach is it's a way for you to get in front of the right person, because a specific kind of person is going to search that thing. And then in addition to that, it's dramatically cheaper, right, than your high intent keywords. I'm curious, on this play, did you see a good enough search volume, or did you not care because you were like, hey, if someone searches this, they're worth it?
Yeah, and that's something where I really try to drill into when I'm finding the right insights, like I was saying before, to ignite that customer growth. Is it's not just about finding search volume, it's about finding the search volume that matters. So it's like you said, anybody could be searching that particular question, but if 100 people are searching for that other question that you pay a lot for, and only 5 are searching for this one, that 5 is my target audience anyways. So it really worked out well on that front, and it drove a ton of leads. And I believe the next closest campaign as far as cost per lead was 123% higher. So it was by far our best performer.
So just to recap, these 10 golden nuggets of tips, I don't want to call it tips anymore, golden nuggets, is number 1, play the long game. Number 2, put together that dossier of information so that you can serve different content to the opportunities that matter. Number 3, go deeper, dynamically offer the content to these accounts based on the things that are resonating. Number 4, so what? Always asking yourself, so what? Connecting what you're doing to the key outcomes that they're leading to. Number 5 is to drill into the personas and titles and the seniorities, take it a level deeper. And then from there, the next point is to test your different value propositions. And then from there, you don't need any fancy tech. Next, set aside time to ideate. Ideally, an hour a week on Fridays is what you found worked best for you, but whatever that works for you as the listener. Next up is to use design templates to accelerate your campaign iterations. And then from there, do not sleep on Google Ads and approach it in a different perspective in terms of covering those key questions that your accounts are searching for. Brandon, thank you so much for being here. If people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn, Brandon Alisoglu. You can find me under my name here. I'm also launching a consultancy, Insights to Ignite. It'll be an email course to really help you figure out how to find those right insights, build the right content, and then distribute it, whether it's SEO, paid, or ABM.
Guys, check out Brandon. Connect with him on LinkedIn. Definitely check out his consultancy as soon as he launches. And Brandon, thank you again for being here. I can't wait for people to hear this.
Yeah, absolutely, Silvio. Thank you.